He thought his home was his safe place, the one thing no one could take from him. But one night, that safety went up in flames. Every wall, every memory, every piece of his life turned to ash. The fire wasn't an accident. Neighbors whispered about who did it. A woman with power in the HOA. A woman they called Karen. But this wasn't just petty rules or neighborly feuds. This was destruction. And just when he believed the nightmare was over, she walked through another door. The courtroom door. His fight for justice had only begun. Before the fire, life was steady. Marcus had built his world brick by brick. Not just the house itself, but everything inside it. He worked long hours, saved carefully, and finally created a home where his children could laugh without worry, where family photos lined the hallway, and where neighbors waved from porches as he passed. For him, that house was more than shelter. It was proof that hard work could carve out a piece of dignity in a world that often denied it. But not everyone saw it that way. In his neighborhood, the homeowners association carried weight, and one voice inside it carried more than the rest. She was known for complaints, for rules that always seemed to fall hardest on him. Grass too long, car parked too close, holiday decorations left up one day past the deadline. Each note slipped into his mailbox felt heavier than the last. Still, Marcus tried to shrug it off. He told himself it was nothing personal, just someone obsessed with control. But deep down, he felt it. The stare that lingered too long, the smile that never quite masked the disdain. He knew tension was building, even if he couldn't name it yet. What Marcus didn't realize was that these small battles were only the beginning. Each warning, each cold glance was leading to something bigger, something darker. A moment was coming that would tear away not just his home, but his sense of safety itself. And when it happened, the line between petty harassment and calculated hatred would burn away, literally. The warnings never stopped. Each week seemed to bring another letter, another notice, another reminder that Marcus didn't quite fit the image certain neighbors thought their community should uphold. He tried to ignore it, but even his children began to notice the way her eyes followed them when they played in the yard. The tension was invisible yet heavy, like smoke before the fire. First, it was just paper threats. Then it grew sharper. His trash cans mysteriously tipped over. His car tires found nails embedded in them, punctures that cost him both time and money. He wondered if it was bad luck, until the pattern became too precise to dismiss. The nights grew uneasy. Small things, strange things began to happen. Porch lights unscrewed, mail missing, a shadow lingering at the edge of his driveway long after dark. Marcus wanted to believe it was nothing, but the knot in his chest tightened with every passing day. Neighbors whispered. Some shook their heads in sympathy, but most looked away, unwilling to get involved. After all, the woman behind it all was loud, influential, and relentless. In meetings, her voice carried over everyone else's. She didn't need to shout to make her contempt known. Her actions spoke louder. Then came the night that would change everything. Marcus remembered it vividly, not because of what he saw, but because of what he smelled. The faint trace of gasoline, carried on the cool air, moments before he locked his door. At first, he thought it was his imagination. But as he drifted to sleep, a crackle stirred him awake. The sound was faint, but it grew quickly. By the time he opened his eyes, the glow outside his window told the truth. Fire. It spread fast, licking up the walls, searing through the roof, swallowing his world piece by piece. Marcus rushed his family out, barefoot and frantic, watching as the home he built collapsed under flames that seemed almost hungry, almost personal. The fire department arrived, but it was too late. Water poured, sirens screamed, but all they could do was stop the fire from spreading to the houses around him. His house, his safe place, was gone. And in the days that followed, the investigation began. The reports didn't point to faulty wiring or an accident. No, traces of accelerant, poured deliberately, told a different story. Someone had set this fire. Someone had wanted his world reduced to ash. Marcus didn't have to wonder long who it was. The same whispers, the same looks, the same smirk that seemed to follow him everywhere. All of it pointed back to her. the HOA leader who had harassed him for months. The woman neighbors casually called Karen. But the story didn't end with the ashes. Because just as Marcus began seeking justice, preparing himself for a long, painful process, fate twisted the knife even deeper. The woman who destroyed his home would not disappear into shadows or rumors. She would stand where he least expected her, inside the very room meant to deliver justice. And when Marcus walked into that courtroom, he wasn't just seeking answers anymore. He was facing the embodiment of every threat, every sneer, every injustice he had endured. The fire had taken his home, but what came next would test whether it could take his spirit. The day of the hearing arrived with a weight Marcus had never felt before. Walking into the courthouse, he expected tension, but nothing could prepare him for the moment their eyes met. She was there, not as a bystander, not as a whisper of suspicion, but seated across the aisle, bold and unshaken, her presence almost defiant. The room felt smaller, air heavier. Every detail of that night replayed in Marcus's mind. The smell of gasoline, the roar of flames, his children coughing as he pulled them out. And now, here she was, dressed neatly, lips pressed into a thin line, as if she belonged in that place of judgment. Evidence was laid out. Reports of accelerants, witness statements of her car circling late that night, the trail of complaints that painted a long history of harassment. With each revelation, Marcus's chest tightened. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about dignity, about the truth of what had been done to him. But she didn't flinch. Not once. Her expression remained cold, almost amused, as though none of it mattered. The injustice burned hotter than the fire ever had. For Marcus, this wasn't simply a case. It was the moment the world would either recognize his suffering or turn away once again. The silence in the courtroom stretched, each second pulling like a thread ready to snap. For a heartbeat, Marcus feared the system would fail him like it had failed so many before. That she would walk free, her actions reduced to excuses, her cruelty hidden behind technicalities. And then, a single statement shifted the air. The words of the prosecutor cut through the room like a blade, leaving no doubt about intent, no room for misunderstanding. The evidence was undeniable. Marcus's heart pounded as the gavel prepared to strike, the weight of justice hanging in balance. This was it, the moment that would decide if his nightmare ended, or if it was only the beginning. The gavel fell, and the sound echoed like thunder in Marcus's chest. The verdict was clear: guilty. For a moment, the weight he had carried for months lifted, replaced by something unfamiliar: vindication. His home was gone, reduced to ashes and memories, but at least the truth had been spoken aloud, undeniable, in front of the very community that once looked away. Yet victory felt complicated. Justice had been served in law, but the scars of that night remained etched into Marcus's life. His children still woke from nightmares of fire. He still drove past the blackened lot where their house once stood, the smell of smoke still lingering in his mind. Justice could punish the person, but it couldn't rebuild the past. Neighbors whispered again, but this time, their voices carried something different. Unease, guilt, maybe even recognition. They had seen what hatred left unchecked could do. They had watched silence allow cruelty to grow until it consumed everything. For Marcus, the fight wasn't just about one woman or one house. It was about the reality faced by so many who are judged not for what they've done, but for who they are. It was about how easily power could be twisted into a weapon, and how fragile safety could become when prejudice hides behind rules and authority. He knew rebuilding would take time, perhaps years. But as he walked out of the courthouse, sunlight hitting his face, he carried something stronger than walls or windows. He carried resilience. And though his house had burned, his spirit refused to, because this story was never just his. It was a reflection of a larger truth, one that asks us all the same haunting question. How many more homes must burn? How many more lives must shatter before we finally decide that enough is enough?